Jess, welcome. Thank you for joining us on Hot Sauce. Really great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Mike. I'm so excited to be here and obviously chat to you and talk about all things sourcing and engaging. I love it.
Awesome. So for people that don't know, you are head of global sourcing for Toll, which is a very fancy flash title. You've also got the Talent Sourcing Collective, which is a community that you're building to assist sources globally in upping their game, and soon to be releasing some courses. So sourcing is your life, your passion,
My jam.
your love. Yeah?
Yes, it is. I do. I love it, and it's a nerdy love, and it's a love that's been running for 17 years and going. So yeah.
And you get around a lot and speaker conferences and globally on webinars, and so it's that kind of the education, thought leadership thing is a big part of your career.
It is, and I think that there's so much opportunity that we have to be able to uplift the capability of not only recruiters, because again, I think we're asking our recruiters to do a lot in these markets, and sourcing is one of those. But I also think it's about uplifting the credibility of our industry, because I think that when you're doing sourcing and particularly outreach to candidates proactively, there is a danger that because there really isn't a tried and tested method to be able to do it well, I think that there's a lot that aren't doing it well, and it's really starting to kind of impact the reputation of not only sourcing but in recruitment in general. So I do feel quite a strong obligation to be able to give back to the community of recruiters, but also to really make sure that the integrity of what we do is really intact.
Awesome. And did you start out in sourcing, or were you in kind of TA recruiting and then fell in love with the sourcing elements and kind of pivoted a bit?
Yeah, cool question. It's such a funny one. So I've been recruiting for 17 years, and I think I had a natural kind of just affinity to reaching out to people. I mean, I'm a fairly efficient / lazy recruiter by all intents and purposes, because I hate having to do unnecessary work. And I think for me, they'll post and pray. It just adds a lot of work and very little return for me. So I always found that I was someone that really liked to connect with people and really offer up jobs really before sourcing was even a thing. I remember when I was at Talus, really, that's probably the first time it became somewhat of a solidified role, because I was actually sending jobs when LinkedIn first came out. I remember sending jobs to people for simulation roles that we had, so Simtex, because it was such a hard space to find people. And so it kind of became a bit of a thing, and so they kind of said, we want to turn that into a job. So really, Talus was one of the first opportunities I had to solidify that, and then I was brought over to GE to start a sourcing function really in its true sense of the word, and I think we were probably one of the very first companies to do that in Australia, and that was back in 2012.
So no playbooks, no kind of
Nothing.
guides of how to run
Instinctual.
it. Just nice.
Completely instinctual. Yeah.
I reckon my love of sourcing was born by a similar thing, that I hated writing job ads, and I'd be constantly, when I was working in agency, constantly my manager was hounding me because one of the KPIs was job ads posted.
Yeah.
And I just sit looking at this blank screen of job ads, of a job ad, trying to write it, and I just sucked at it so bad. But sourcing and the hunting and the creativeness and the coming back in and all that kind of stuff, I found that really fun, and my competitive side kind of got sparked, whereas writing job ads was kind of a bit like
exactly right. It's a bit wah. You have to do it. You've got to tick that box. Whereas sourcing is a little bit creative. It's quite intuitive as well. And I've done the sourcing courses through AIR. So I'm actually, from a certification perspective, yes, technically I am a certified internet sourcer through AIRS in the States. But for me, I think that good sourcing to me is instinctual. You've got to have a combination of kind of the technical how-to, the instinctual, this feels right, this feels authentic, and that's why candidates are responding to me. But you've also got to have that commercial layer of, now that I've got all of this, what does that then mean for my business? I think that I'm a bit of an anomaly that way, because I kind of tick all of those boxes, whereas some sources are very much, in the technical, how do I find someone? But where they do fall down, and what we're going to talk about today is how do you engage those prospects in a really authentic, engaging way that, again, really relates to the integrity of a source's bread and butter.
That's hot sauce. That's what we're here to talk about. Hot sauce. And so we've invited you along to bring a message that we can dissect and understand how and why you created it, how it performs. So this message here you brought with you today, this is email by the looks of it. This is an email outreach strategy.
Yeah, email or in-mail. So I have a set of templates that I can interchange. And so you can see here, this is for a new approach. I've got a whole suite of templates that I've actually created as part of the Sourcing Guru course, because again, I think that, you know, we're expecting recruiters to know how to engage. We're expecting them to be marketers, and that's not fair. So they need to have these templates that they can tweak and they can pull out as and when they need to, depending on the role, the approach. I've got some asking for referrals. I've got some saying thanks, but you know, you've come back and said you're not interested. That's cool. Let's stay in touch. So I've drafted a whole pile of them, but this one actually worked really, really well. This was a real one that I did that I put on LinkedIn a couple of months ago. It was for quite a senior role, but the reason I like this one in particular, if we kind of dissect it, the yellow parts are the ones that are interchangeable. So if you were to use this template, you can use all of those yellow things, and you can put in the company that you're approaching on behalf of. You can put in the company that they're part of. The calendar scheduling link as well is in there. So it's very customizable, but there's a couple of things in this template that actually really work well. So I can go through those.
Please.
The first one is the third sentence. I love how you have XXX in your profile. The reason I have that there and how I used this was I actually approached someone who was ex-GE, but in the States. Now, I'd never worked with them previously. But I said, I love how you have GE in your profile. How cool is that? I'm an ex-GEer. How rare is that? And so I customized that sentence again for relatability. And the reason that we want to do this in messages right off the bat is a couple of reasons. One, it shows prospects you've actually taken the time to look at their profile and you know who they are. The biggest mistake I'm seeing with engaging prospects at the moment, and this has been going on since LinkedIn was even a thing, is the blanket spammed, not customized, non-authentic messages. I get them from recruiters all the time, and I actually start firing back emails now saying, what are you doing to the industry? Please stop this. I got one a few weeks ago that says, please, I'm trying to make you better. But one of them I got a few weeks ago was, I have a recruiter role that I thought you might be interested in. No, mate, I'm not. And here are the reasons why, you know. So it has to be that the candidate feels like you have looked at their profile. And again, we really have no business as sources engaging anybody where it is not a relevant role. Again, you're wasting your time, number one. But number two, you're damaging your reputation. Your reputation is something that talks on your behalf before you've even entered the conversation. So you've got to be really careful of that. So one thing I've also been taught, and I love doing as well, is there's no doubt you receive many similar approaches given your experience at your current organisation. So again, it also talks to the fact, look, mate, I know that it's a noisy market. I know you get a lot of approaches, but I know where you are, and this is why I'm approaching you. I know you're at DHL. I know you're at GE. I know you're wherever, whatever relevant organisation it is. Acknowledge that you viewed their profile, and this is not a spam message. Customization here is key. And the other one is, you know, I thought I'd reach out and connect here because at my organisation, we're doing some pretty cool stuff, which I'd love to share with you. It's always got to be about the candidate. I think in sourcing, we are so quick to make it about us when it needs to be what's in it for them. So I've got 3 things here, and I remember at Sozu this year, Marcel, who is an absolute guru in all things sourcing, he actually brought up one of his slides, which was around the psychology of sourcing and engaging in particular. And one of the things was keep it in 3s. The brain has this ability to kind of read things in 3s. And so when I crafted this template, I was like, right, there's going to be 3 cool things. There might be 10, but I'm going to give you 3 because that's how the brain works. So, and I'm going to write them down in the message to really say, well, here's what we're about. Here's what you would be looking for if you were to come in. And here's why you probably want to talk to me.
Any tips around that? Because I feel often when we see outreach going out the door, they can be maybe not as cool as you would hope. They can be like remote work or maybe a personal development budget, or what are the kind of things that you're associating with? Are they technical problems? Are they career progression? Like how do you kind of develop and work out what are the things to prioritize in those 3 dot points?
Look, it's knowing your organisation that's absolutely critical. So this is partly going back to when you're taking your sourcing brief or your job brief with your hiring manager, say to them, if you were to give me 3 things that's really cool about you, your company and your role, what would they be? If I was new, sell me why I should come and talk to you. And so this is where that information is really critical. So it could be depending on the role. So for this role in particular, it was a senior role. So for me, it was about making an impact. You actually get to be seen and heard and make an impact felt across the organisation. You get to be part of a transformation. It's bigger than what we're trying to do here at Toll. You know, be part of something really special. Thirdly, culture starts with you. If you're cool and you like to do something different and think differently, we want you to bring that to us because we want to do that too.
I love how you've already got them there.
It's
You've sent a couple of these messages out before, I suspect.
I absolutely have, and they work every time because they're authentic and they're real. That's what we want. And secondly, people know that I'm being real when I'm sending these messages. It's not this scripted, bland blanket. I have an exciting opportunity to process payroll or whatever it is. When it's not exciting, what's exciting about that? You have to know your organisation. And so for me, I know Tile extremely well. I know the positions that I've got. I know the hiring managers. I take the time to understand because, again, I know that when I'm sending out engagements like this, me knowing is going to make these engagements far outperform any other competitor message that goes out, and typically they do. So for this one in particular, it was around 55-58% was the hit rate, response rate on this one.
Wow.
So LinkedIn average is 30%, to give you some context.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't send a lot because I didn't need to, but the ones I sent were incredibly impactful. Now, obviously, every single time I spoke with them, some said, yeah, look, hey, it looks probably not up for me right now. And then I'd be like, yep, that's cool, let's stay in touch. But, to have that kind of response rate in this market suggests a couple of things. One was that they appreciated that it was completely customized and tailored to them. They appreciated the fact that I took the time to send messages individually because, again, I craft them individually. And then lastly, I think that they engaged with the cool selling things. I think that they resonated with that because it made sense to them because they could picture themselves in that kind of scenario. So I think that's why it probably worked more than most in the market.
And so in terms of the scalability or ability to generate these at scale, obviously if you're getting 55% hit rate versus a 10%, you don't have to send out as many. So you're getting the time saving in the customization because you're going to get better engagement rates versus having to source a bunch more people and hit them with more generic messaging. You've also got the ability to lean on some templating here, so you're not starting with that blank page like I spoke about before with the job ad stuff. So that's a really good kind of foundation to get going. If you look at incorporating these into like a multi-step process, are you doing this level of personalization in each of the steps, or are you kind of leaning in to the personalization thing hard early and then maybe just doing some friendly, well-written follow-ups that give you the efficiency of the multiple touch points without having to kind of customize each step?
Yeah, this outreach, so any kind of new outreach for me, new approach is 100% customized. I have the bones of the template there, definitely to save me time, but also it's a tried and tested method. I'm not someone that will recreate the wheel. Don't fix what's not broken. I will always leverage what's working well, but where I will leverage things like customization is, if they come back and say, hey, look, thanks so much for the approach, Jess. It's not for me for right now, not the right time. I have a whole other series of templates that I've saved that I actually send it, say, hey, look, thanks so much for coming back to me. I can appreciate the time that's taken. I'd love to hear from you though. If you think there's someone in your network that that would love to hear from me that this role would be really cool for, please feel free to send me their details. I'd love to have a chat with them. Let's touch base, in a couple of months and see what you're up to. That to me is a template that's just an auto send, but they feel like, oh wow, that source has taken the time to say, A, thank you for me responding, but B, there's a follow-up there. But also, again, selfishly, I'm asking for referrals because I'm still sourcing. So I can save time with all of those sorts of templates that I've already created and saved. But this particular one, at the very first engagement, it's got to be customized.
What about it if it is just a payroll gig where you are just processing pay and there aren't maybe as many sexy things as a digital transformation, blah, blah, blah. Are there any ideas or tricks that you've got around creating those hooks in what may be a less sexy kind of role, taking a less sexy role to market?
There is a hook in every role. Just because they're processing payroll, what that's offering is stability, continuity, flexibility to be able to leave on time and go see your family, great work-life balance, It may be that they're processing payroll today, but they might grow into a different kind of a role tomorrow. The skills might be transferable. You might have a really great internal mobility policy. You might give, days off for their birthday. You might have, ping pong every Friday in the office. There's always a hook to every role because people are currently doing those roles now, right? So there's got to be a reason why someone processes payroll. Maybe they like the satisfaction that they derive from paying people.
Yep.
And that's okay too. It's actually really kind of understanding that persona and that particular role type. If you don't know what the hook is, speak to someone in your organization who's currently doing it.
Yeah.
Hey mate, why do you like your job?
Yeah, a lot of people would sit at the computer screen struggling when there's a collection of people around them, that like hiring managers, current employees in the similar roles. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to get hiring managers and our organisations to have more skin in the game when we're approaching people. You know, I have crafted messages like this that I've got hiring managers to send out because they've got the depth and the reach in the market. Make sure they've got skin in the game. We don't have to do everything in sourcing. You know, we're trying to find the best people for the organisation. Well, okay, great. It's a team effort. It's a, you know, if you don't know what payroll is exciting for, then ask someone in payroll. They might tell you something you don't already know. And I think sometimes in sourcing and recruitment, we don't humble ourselves to that. We're not curious. And I think the one thing that I think with engagement is be curious about the people you're engaging with. What makes them tick? Why do they like their role? What would make them leave to join your organisation? What's cool about your role that you don't currently already know? Go talk to somebody different. So I just think it's spending the time crafting these messages up front, again, saves loads of time later. And to your point before, Mike, which I think is really important for recruiters for right now, is you don't have to send a lot. The ROI isn't in the amount of messages that you send, it's the quality of messages you're sending to the quality of people that you're sending them to, because you're saving time speaking to people that aren't right, that responded to adverts that aren't going to match the role at all. So again, it's really about the ROI of your time that I think really makes it worthwhile to set these up properly from the get-go.
Do you have a set structure of like a LinkedIn followed by an email followed by a hiring manager, or is it kind of fluid, dependent on role and time, maybe seasonality, blah, blah, blah?
Totally depends on a number of variables. You know, I definitely have a couple of rules that I do kind of generally go with. If I can get a phone number first, I will always make a phone call as opposed to an email. Now, I know that can be quite controversial because people say to me all the time, oh, but Jess, I don't want to call their organisation. Why? Your competitors are. What's stopping you? You know, if it's not a good time to talk, you schedule in a time. You've already made that contact. If it is on email, if you've got their direct email address, absolutely send an email. Hey, I'd love to have a chat with you. Can you let me know a time? I've included a scheduling link below. Here's my availability. Let me know what works for you. And that's probably the other thing as well I would point out on this template too. You give them an action. Any good engagement is leaving the candidate with an action to do. So it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'd be interested to have a chat. Oh, I can already see her availability. Oh, that was easy. Let me just put something in her calendar and I've already got time locked in. Make it as easy as possible for that candidate to engage with you. But back on that other topic for a tick. So yes, definitely send an email. The one thing I'm noticing that I even say to my own team is, do you do a follow-up? So if you send an in-mail or an email, what do you do? Oh, I don't follow up is generally the answer that I get. I 9 times out of 10 get a greater response rate the second approach I make, saying, hey, just wanting to check in. I sent you a message about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Just wanted to make sure, A, you got it, and B, if this is relevant for you, I'd love to have a chat. Here's my availability. Let's put in some time to speak further. That follow-up is absolutely critical for a couple of reasons. The candidate now knows that this was not a spam message because you've actually followed up. B, you've bothered to follow up. And then C, it means that to them, you really want them. So there's a lot of psychology around the follow-up, and I think it's a lot of this sort of simple stuff sources aren't doing. If you're not following up a second time, you're missing the opportunity. I do have a 3 follow-up rule though. So if I've sent a message, say 1 week, 2 weeks later, I'll send a follow-up. I'll send a 3rd message a week after that and just go, hey, totally appreciate this probably isn't for you right now. That's absolutely fine. You've got my contact info. If anything changes, let me know.
The breakup message.
That's the breakup message. It's not me, it's you, you know.
Works.
But you've got to leave it in a way that still allows for that door to be opened later. So yeah, and look, and on channel, absolutely, multi-channel approach. You know, there's been so many times where, you know, I'm not a one-trick pony. I don't just use LinkedIn. I don't just use email. I don't just use phone. It's really about where my candidates are. Yep. Stack. You know, Twitter, back when it was a really big thing for, you know, Elon Musk took it over and ruined the platform.
Let's keep politics out of this, please, Jess.
I know. There was one senior role I remember I was headhunting at GE, and she wasn't responding on LinkedIn, but she had a Twitter profile and she was a runner. And I remember saying to her, I've seen your profile, looks like you've done a marathon, how cool is that? Love to chat to you about a running club we've got here at GE. And it was a tweet, bang, straight away. So I'm very much any channel works. Just depends on them.
What about the one channel that freaks people out? Work email. What do you think about work email?
I think when used appropriately, I think it's absolutely fine. I think you need to be a bit more respectful, and I think you need to appreciate that sometimes, again, particularly at the more senior roles, they have EAs that generally monitor their inboxes, right? You need to be very careful. Again, I'm not adverse to it, but it definitely wouldn't be my first port of call. I think if you're sending a message to a work email, it would be more like a meeting invite or a meeting request to talk about, you'd probably change the title to say, not career opportunities, but you might go business opportunities. You might put that there. Hi, wanted to reach out, excuse the direct approach. I'd love to discuss business opportunities with you if you've got some time. See below my calendar invite. That kind of approach, again, it works.
We're seeing some creative TAs leveraging hiring managers in that regard, and turning into more of a peer-to-peer talk about industry, talk shop, discuss a challenge that we're dealing with, and try and use that via the work email. So
absolutely. Yep. I made our managing director at GE. So he was doing some approaches for his direct LT. And so I said to him, here are the candidates, here's the templates, but I want you to send it, because coming from you, there's an automatic level of credibility and trust there. And also a little bit more of a curious nature applied. So they're going to want to respond to you, to talk to you, to have the relationship and the time with you. But then I'll be on the call with you to talk about, oh, hey, here's Jess from our talent acquisition, sourcing function. We'd really like to have a career conversation with you together. And, the hit rate was almost 100% on those ones, because it just had that credibility there. So again, if your hiring manager is set up for success and you can actually show them how to do this properly and safely, absolutely have a go at it. It really, really works, especially for the senior roles, for sure.
Well, thank you very much, Jess. We definitely covered lots in that chat. I think this is a cracker. There's the bones. Anybody could get moving on this and have a great email or email out the door in only a few minutes. So really appreciate you bringing this. Really appreciate the energy as always and the passion for sourcing. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Love it. Love what you're doing. Everyone give it a go. I'd love to hear how this all works for everyone.